Hello, TVT students. I hope you're enjoying the Model Seder. I hope that if you have 11th grade leaders, that they have stepped up to the plate and given you some things to smile about, some things to think about, and a story to try to better understand that story of slavery and freedom. So we're now up to the 10 plagues, and we know how that works. The 10 plagues are a very, very famous part of the Seder, where after we say each of the plagues, we dip our pinky into the kind of our cup of joy, and we take out a little bit to kind of basically acknowledge the idea that, even though we became free through the use of those plagues, that other people did suffer, and kind of making sure that our heart is not so joyful that we don't understand that in that moment of our own joy, there was sadness as well, right? In the ideal world, joy for one means joy for all, but for some reason, that is not true in the slavery story and freedom story, and that is not true in Egypt. And I think sometimes when we think about that perfect world, which we'll do when we get to the part of the Elijah story, kind of we'll ask that question, like, is there a way that good for one means good for all, or good for many means good for all? And yet we live in a world where so often, right, good for some requires actually the kind of beating down or oppression of others. But I want to talk specifically about the 10 plagues, because one of the jobs at this point of your Seder that I've asked the 11th grade, and hopefully that you'll participate in as well, is to ask kind of how might you re-envision those plagues for today? And I want to kind of answer this question by looking specifically at what is the purpose of a plague? The purpose of a plague isn't just to wreak havoc and destruction and to show God's anger. The purpose of the plague was actually to teach. The purpose of the plague was actually to get Pharaoh to change his mind. Pharaoh thinks one way, God thinks another way. And God is trying to get Pharaoh from the Pharaoh thoughts to the God's thoughts. Pharaoh's thoughts are keep these slaves as long as I possibly can. I am the ruler of all. I am the most important being in the world. And God is saying, no, actually, that's not the case. That is not the case. And I want to change you. So plague after plague after plague, even though we see it wreaking havoc and destruction on Egypt, really it's the God is kind of asking, will this be the plague that teaches Pharaoh, who wants to hold tight on slavery, to let those people go? So I want to ask you the questions. What are the plagues that would teach someone who thinks one way to think another way? And so instead of thinking about plagues, what are the things that we need to do in our own lives when we see someone thinking one way and we're like, you know what, that is actually just wrong. It's just wrong how they're thinking. I need to get that person to move from here to here with their ideas, right? I mean, some of us say, no, actually, you know what, in our society we live in today, people think the way they think and they're never going to think otherwise. But actually, the plagues are saying, actually, here's God attempt to change, right? So how would you do it? That's my challenge to you during the plague part of our Seder. How would you change someone who is thinking one way to think radically a different way? What would be the steps? What would be the strategies? What would be the mechanisms that you would put into place to try to convince someone who thinks A to actually think B instead? Good luck, everyone.